Hello, this is Professor Werwath. I want to talk about cycle time reduction. This is a key issue in most new product development organizations that I've worked at in the past. In fact, in many cases, we've had initiatives to help systematically reduce cycle time. By cycle time, we mean the time from concept to delivery of a new product. This is not manufacturing cycle time in terms of how many widgets per hour you're pushing out the door. This is literally how long does it take to develop a new product. Um, these concepts, I guess, were developed by my personal experience over probably a 20-year career at places like Motorola, various divisions and sectors of Motorola, but we all had a common goal to reduce our new product development cycle time. Some of the content here was generated by ChatGPT as well as some of the formatting. Let's get started. So why is new product development cycle time reduction so important? Obviously, first to market is a key advantage. If you can't achieve that, then you are often trailing your competitors and requiring yourselves to be differentiated in other ways. First to market gives people an advantage in the marketplace. Brand recognition, brand establishment. You can establish the rules for new technology and new products. Apple was, very good at bringing the iPhone and the smartphone slab factor to the market with, for the first time, actually a multi-touch display. That multi-touch display changed the market forever. There was no such thing as a smartphone without a multi-touch display after Apple. So what this does is it enhances your competitiveness. It's crucial for businesses striving to maintain a competitive edge. Your quicker development times lead to faster time to market, allowing companies to respond to market dynamics and consumer demands more swiftly. This not only improves your market share, but it also breeds adaptability in an ever-evolving business landscape. So clearly, this is why it's important. The cynical approach and perhaps the farcical answer might be, why is it so important when, frankly, you can get around it by simply getting an earlier start? Why can't you get an earlier start? I guess that requires a degree of foresight and knowledge of a market and a technology and an industry that apparently most companies don't have. So if you don't have that kind of insight and foresight, you're kind of stuck having to move very quickly once you do figure out what you need to do, which is often probably a little late to the game. I'm going to be identifying a series of approaches that I've used in the past to reduce cycle time. And the first and foremost one is simply having an analytics-based approach, right? So this is where the data scientists and even some project managers can get together, use your actual data in terms of how long it takes you to develop a new product, step by step, process by process, and then figure out where your bottlenecks are, and then relieve those bottlenecks. How can you do that? Well, relieving bottlenecks can be as simple as adding capacity. Capacity in testing, capacity in resources, product development, you're actually writing code or developing hardware. Adding people can, to some extent, speed you up. That's one approach, but not everywhere. You don't want to uniformly just throw people at everything. You want to throw capacity at the bottleneck. Now, what that does is it relieves that bottleneck and creates another one. So the next bottleneck will need to be relieved. But as long as you're taking this analytics-based approach, you can go from bottleneck to bottleneck. So very similar to what Eli Goldratt teaches in The Goal. And so you're basically trying to address the rate limiting factor of any new development process, right? You can look at past schedule slippages and see where those occur and what stage of the process, and then look at the root causes of that. Perhaps it's not resources. It could be a fundamental defect in your processing or in your product or in your code that stumbles every team, and every team stumbles across that fundamental issue. Solving that fundamental issue can open up a whole series of accelerations for your team. So that, and maybe the potential use of automation. Regression testing is a great example where very labor intensive process. It's really helpful if you can automate a good chunk of that. The more you can automate, in many cases, the faster you can go. Process reengineering is another approach. This is a little bit different from the analytics-based approach. Here you're looking at cross-functional teams, complex processes that take many months, if not years, and require a whole lot of interaction between organizations or different segments of your organization. So, creating effective teams, cross-functional teams to thoroughly understand existing processes, starts by mapping out those processes. In many cases, the organization itself doesn't know its own process. No one person understands the whole process. It requires a team to basically and effectively map it out from cradle to grave, start to finish, and then engaging knowledgeable members to help pinpoint areas for improvement, right? Processes that are unnecessary, processes that are duplicative, processes that can go on in parallel, right? Processes that can be accelerated. So step by step, looking at every element of the process and mapping it out and creating a more efficient map, right? In some cases, it could be as simple as resequencing. Resequencing can sometimes buy you risk reduction as well as effort reduction, right? In my class in BPR, Business Process Reengineering, we actually talked about how resequencing, even the hiring process in a company, right, can help speed things up given the resource constraints that a company has, right? Mapping your current and future process. So after you've done the as is, the current process, it's upon the team now to figure out what's the should be process. What are you trying to re-engineer to? What would the new process look like? How is it different from the old? How would you measure it? How would you capture its value? How would you quantify each step along the way in terms of time, in terms of effort, in terms of cost, and in terms of effectiveness, right? So map before and after, should be and as is, right? So that's what you're trying to achieve in the process reengineering approach. So this is the second approach. Let's go to a third approach, which I've used many times. This one's more expensive. This one, you're going to spend green dollars out the door to hire a consulting firm. I've got a couple in mind. If you want to know the names, I will be glad to send them to you by email. But these are companies that look at new product development and they benchmark company against company. And the way they do that is they get information from these companies on a contract basis, right? And in that contract, it's very clear about how they're going to sanitize that data so that only the data you submit as a product development team and the averages of all the others are included in your feedback. So you get to see in your final report what your process times, what your process efforts, what your process qualities are step by step versus your competitors. This requires a trusted consulting firm to get out there and to solicit those competitors on your behalf and to create a report that all the competitors, all the companies in that benchmarking effort will benefit from. So you need a trusted firm, you need to understand the competitive landscape, and you need to then, when you have that data, decide if you're going to make a financial long-term investment. In other words, if you find out your productivities are low compared to everybody else, maybe you need to increase those productivities through automation, through training, through better tools and methodologies. So all of those are investments. All of those are what I would call capability investments that companies should be making throughout their life cycle. On a broader scale, right? What I've seen happen at the corporate level when you have multiple divisions involved is to create a corporate initiative towards cycle time reduction. Now, what that means is, in the case of Motorola, we had 3 or 4 sectors involved. We had probably a dozen or so divisions or more involved in reducing their new product development cycle time. The corporate office would maintain the standards and processes, right? So they would have some collaborative training. They would require independent plans from each division. And then they would be monitoring at each stage along the way, right? Monitoring and monthly reporting in public, right? So we had to go in front of every other division and talk about our progress towards cycle time reduction or lack thereof. So either way, it's either a good news or bad news story. And, frankly, we called it 10X. 10X was the moniker, the name, the brand. The idea was if you were taking, let's say, 48 months to develop a product, how can you do it in 5? So a 10X reduction in cycle time. Not easy to do. In hindsight, I can't remember if any of us actually achieved the full 10X. But the good news is we did make significant improvements in our cycle time reduction as a result of this initiative. This kind of focused attention and energy and peer pressure, the combination of both, right, led to some real reductions in time. The program management office is a bit more of a systematic approach. So this is within a division. You have a program management team who establishes standards, who establishes templates, planning data and data sets, a portfolio management process, right? All of those things come together in a PMO along with a process team for process improvement. This was the most, I guess, robust PMO that I think I've ever built, where we had the process people, the portfolio people, the project managers, the finance people, all sharing and collecting data towards a continual process improvement, right? So the PMO is not necessarily an event. Most of the other things I've been talking about up till now are projects or events. The program office is a continual, ongoing process, something that you will continue to do as long as the business is in operation. So I want to step back for a moment and say, okay, how does all this fit together in the big scheme of things, right? You can start almost anywhere on this chart, but let's start with the strategy on the left. So this left strategy input basically feeds the product roadmap. So what products are you delivering in what time frame against what markets, right? What technologies are mapping to those products? That roadmap feeds your resource plans above, so that's upper left. And those resource plans feed your expense budgets. Your expense budgets feed your income statements. And your income statements are also fed by your operational plan. So how many widgets are you selling per month, per year? What price point are you going to have? What's your cost points, right? So that your operations plan feeds your income statements, and it also feeds your product roadmap, and it's fed by it. So you'll notice every arrow is going in both directions, right? Because in a sense, these are all pretty well intertwined, right? So in many ways, yes, the portfolio process is feeding your budgetary process and your planning process, right? And your resource plans basically determine how many headcount you have and how many headcount you will have in the future to address certain objectives, right? So the resource plans are part of a bigger picture on a pro forma basis, right? So this helps you plan what resources you need, when you need them, for what projects, and with what skill sets, right? So this table summarizes, I guess, the various efficiency strategies targeting cycle time reduction. One option is to have multi-shift engineering. So these are actual techniques that we use, right? Strategies that we use. Multi-shift engineering means either you're working in one physical location, 2 or 3 shifts per day. Oftentimes the testing processes would be done at night so that the development processes could be done during the day. That way the 24-hour clock isn't limited to the 8-hour workday. You can literally get a 16 or 24-hour workday. Another approach to doing this is to work around the clock around the world. And the way to do that is you have offshore development centers or ODCs that are working hand in glove with your local team, and they're working around the clock. So while the India team is working, the US team is asleep and vice versa, right? So that way the 24-hour clock gets you 2 full cycles of engineering effort. And of course, in the digital world, you can pass the work back and forth to each other. It's imperative that those handoffs be done quickly, succinctly, and effectively, and those have to be managed pretty carefully, right? Resource planning tools, right? So this started as a simple spreadsheet. It became a relational database, and I'm sure today it can be done in a much more efficient manner. But these databases plot out what resources you're going to need for what projects, in what locations, at what timeframes, and for how long. All of that resource planning needs to be integrated across the division, across the organization. At one time, I think we had over 2,000 engineers in our relational database tracking resources and their future assignments. This is not a backward-looking document. This is a forward-looking dynamic spreadsheet. Constantly asking the question, what do you need and when will you need it to meet the roadmap requirements, okay? Automated testing, I've mentioned already, right? So automated testing simply says regression is rote, regression is quite repeatable. And in that sense, it's the easiest thing to automate. And it's the first thing you should automate, right? Daily stand-up meetings enhance the accountability across teams. This can be part of an agile implementation, and it often is. Agile is not necessarily the right thing for everybody or every situation. But daily stand-up meetings are a simple way of holding people accountable and making sure they deliver what they were supposed to and keeping people focused on the tasks at hand, right? Reduce product complexity. Another way to think about this is through modularity or platform leveraging. So the use of platforms to develop multiple derivatives, the use of modules to develop interchangeable components within a platform. These are keys to lowering cycle time, right? And lowering development effort as well. So it's not just the time to market, but it's now also the effort to get to market. So, we have data-driven approaches here. Analytics identify the key bottlenecks, the processes that are streamlined as a result of that, and then some insights in terms of what you can do across your competitive landscape. What are the other competitors doing? What are you doing? I think some of the approaches I've described in the last few slides give you a sense of how that can work. Ultimately, you want to empower teams to improve independently. You want them to be engaged in the process and to take it seriously, right? When your quality improves, when the data sets you're using are higher quality, when the requirements are correct to begin with, when you have good strategies that are solid, then you have the ability to actually reduce cycle time by actually reducing the steps in the process, right? You won't need as many iterations of tests. You won't need as many field trials. There's a lot of things you don't need when the quality is significantly better, almost upfront, right? So the 5 key approaches that I mentioned earlier help mitigate cycle time issues, bring unique advantages, and necessitate tailored strategies. Not everything will work for everybody. You need to decide, do we need a corporate initiative here? Do we need a PMO that's an expanded PMO? Should we take an analytics approach, et cetera, et cetera. So the various approaches that we've gone through, find the ones that work for you for your situation, right? Implementing these strategies is essential for fostering an efficient development environment while reducing cycle time. First to market is just the beginning. It's just like any other race, I guess, or any other treadmill that once you're on, staying ahead of the market is key. So it's not just winning that race, but staying ahead. If you think about companies like Apple, they've been at the top of their game for more than a decade now. That's very, very difficult to do when you figure every 9 to 12 months they have a new product. Every 9 to 12 months they expose themselves to potentially being dethroned by some competitor, right? Samsung has roughly that same cycle time. And every time that Samsung comes out with a new product, so does Apple. So Apple and Samsung are going head to head. It's very easy I would think, for one to get ahead of the other. And yet what we see is, in many ways, they've been holding similar market shares for some time now. AI promises to revolutionize the whole process, right? Cycle times could be cut dramatically, right? Product planning, architecture design, product development, product deployment, full-scale software integration, right? All of these can be done through various forms of generative AI. The question is, how will this be organized? How will this be managed? How will this be executed? What is the role of the engineer? What's the role of the project and product manager? What's the role of the business team? And how does AI basically differentiate your products from every other product out there? Because if it's the same data set, right, and the same logic and the same Gen AI tools, who's to say how one product from one company will differ from another? It'll boil down to the prompting. It'll boil down to the people using these tools, driving these tools, and prompt engineering these tools. That's what's going to make the difference. So those teams that have those types of skills, combined with the cycle time reductions, I predict will be tomorrow's winners. So obviously, the future direction here is to continue the improvement journey. Another way of framing this is that every development team needs to continually make investments in their capabilities, capability enhancements, capability improvements, both in their development teams, their tools, their technologies like AI, their platforms, the rigorous nature of their design, and the capability of those platforms. We see this now. I mean, we see Tesla with their own chipsets. We see Apple with their own chipsets. We see Google with their own chipsets. No longer will they rely on the Intels and AMDs of the world to provide more or less generic chips. or even NVIDIA to provide GPUs. They're coming up with their own customized, task-centered and task-oriented GPUs and CPUs that will be specialized for their needs, optimized for their needs, both in terms of cost and performance. So that is the future direction, right? The continual improvement, not just in process, but in product and technology and people, so that that everyone can at least strive to stay ahead. And with that, I will leave it to you.